This crisis, at the same time, is making to the people to lose hope in politicians, the system, and of course, to hate this economic and financial elite. So it makes us think who or whom are going to be those who offer us the solution. To which one's leaders are we going to follow, to trust? After all this mess, after so much suffer, destruction, death, are we gonna get back to believe in those who are gonna take us to this hell? We are not going to trust in anybody after this world war. The elite needs a final lie after the nuclear conflict, which used to convince us. The next part of the video is a theory, which circulates in books, websites, videos, since long time ago. So this part is going to be presented as what is, as a theory. If you don't want to believe it, don't do it, because we are not presented it as the truth. And at the same time, don't see due to the following topic, the whole video as rubbish. How much we know and how. What do we know and what not? How reliable is the information the governments give us? How much and what is hidden from us? I'm pretty sure that sometime in our life we have thought these questions, and certainly we have come to the conclusion that governments tell us a percentage of truth. They manipulate the information and through the mass media convince us of all they say. This advanced technology we usually see in those futuristic Hollywood movies perhaps are not so from the science fiction. But our governments already have this kind of technology. Otherwise, why are there military secret bases in the world as the famous Area 51? What if those flying saucers, UFOs, that witnesses claim to have seen are really undisclosed military technology? According to some sources, governments could be concealing technologies and cures of diseases, among other advances, for their own convenience and future plans.
The blueprint for HAARP, High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program.
What does HAARP do? HAARP is a large antenna where we beam radio frequency energy up into the upper atmosphere, and we create on a small scale what the sun normally does.
The assignment came that the Navy and the Air Force were to manage the program.
Applications discussed in the patents included destroying missiles. Communications control and disruption were included. There were some other ideas both to possibly modify weather and finally to lift a portion of the upper atmosphere further out into space where hopefully it would be able to deflect missile trajectories.
In 1983, I did radiotomography with 30 watts, looking for oil in the ground. I found 26 oil wells over a 9-state area, and 100% of the time was accurate with just 30 watts of power beaming straight into solid rock. HAARP uses 1 billion watts beamed straight into the ionosphere for experiments. Picture these strings on the piano as layers of the earth. Each one has its own frequency. What we used to do is beam radio waves into the ground, and it would vibrate any strings that were present in the ground. We might get a sound back like, and we'd say, that's natural gas. We might get a sound back like, and we'd say, that's crude oil. We were able to identify each frequency. We accomplished this with just 30 watts of radio power. If you do this with 2 billion watts, the vibrations are so violent that the entire piano would shake. In fact, the whole house would shake. In fact, the vibrations could be so severe underground that could even cause an earthquake.
HAARP can create some of the effects that the sun creates that are similar to the aurora borealis.
HAARP can paint designs in the sky, if you will. You know, it can take the beam and move it in any pattern that the scientist who's doing experiments.
The Morrises are experts in non-lethal weapons technology. They are consultants to the Defense Department, CIA, NSA, and world-renowned think tanks.
The technology necessary to project three-dimensional images to a point in space requires no new breakthroughs in science. We have the technology now.
Overall, the non-lethal weapons development program is aimed at giving our military options between talking and shooting.
A specific system development we really can't talk about.
But the Morrises did talk in general about secret military experiments with lifelike 3D projections in the sky called holograms.
Holograms on a battlefield would be to divert the attention of the enemy, to deliver propaganda or something very frightening to make the enemy run away if you think that he will believe that what you are sending is really an angel, a devil, a UFO.
And where could this type of weaponry be tested? Perhaps not coincidentally, along the US-Mexico border at the Army's electronic proving ground in Fort Huachuca, Arizona.
Keep in mind that test facilities like Fort Huachuca in Arizona are electrical optical test beds, and part of what they're testing are the effects of these electro-optical devices on a target population.
And the target population may be us.
These have been a few proofs of not official technology from the governments. But let's focus on the famous UFO sightings. There are numerous testimonials from people who have seen this kind of technology, presumably from other planets, when it is much more likely to be technology developed by governments that they show sometimes to feed the belief of the existence of beings from other planets. According to historical theory, during the Third Reich, Nazis as scientists and investigators developed this kind of technology, called anti-gravity technology. After the Second World War, these Nazis as scientists were brought by the US government to USA, weeping his past and disguising their real identity to get the progress they did. This operation is known as Paperclip Operation. To get the knowledge and the progress from the Nazis as scientists, as rockets, nuclear weapons, and anti-gravity technology, in which we are gonna get focus. The Die Glocke, the bell, the Nazi bell, was a project of anti-gravity technology carried out by these scientists under the command of the General Hans Kammler, the SS, major in the Nazi military technology, a scientific engineer who was involved in the development of the V-2 missiles, jet planes, flying wings, UFOs, and underground constructions, among other projects. Igor Witkowski is a Polish military technology researcher who has spent over 20 years studying the prodigious ingenuity of the Nazi bell. The journalist Ned Koch, a specialist in aerospace and defense issues, who works for the magazine Jane's Defense Weekly, was interested in the great information that Igor Witkowski had on the technological projects of the Nazis, and especially by the Office of Secret Developments. Igor Witkowski showed to Nick Koch the field where the project of the Nazi bell was made, concretely in the Czech border between Sudeten and Lower Silesia, and next to the village of Ludwigsdorf, in which the Nazis were developing the anti-gravity model. Was that after when the US government began to create this kind of technology? What is clear is that the elite, since long time ago, has been trying to convince us of the idea of the existence of extraterrestrial beings through mass media.
Thought of visitors from another planet would give a lot of folks the willies.
Yeah, one man says it's been happening and that the government, specifically NASA, knows about it. J.R. Barry has the story.
TV Sports.
Greetings, citizens of Earth. My people have developed technologies which allow us to throw off our physical forms and travel great and travels in the blink of an eye. We are in dialogue with your leaders to help the human race survive its infancy, for we believe in you. We are helping your scientists find cures for diseases which afflict and helping you to preserve your planet's most precious resources. Many among us wage peace, and one day, with our help, war may be a thing of the past.
Music. In this musical video of Katy Perry, we can see the scenario of a world destroyed, possibly due to a global conflict, and how the arrival of an extraterrestrial being makes everything back to the normality. Films, documentaries.
Most of the stories of ancient Egypt and Mayan and Incas talk about sun gods coming to the earth and teaching them engineering and writing and all of their science. I started to wonder if all these sun gods were not advanced civilization coming from another part of our galaxy. These texts and many ancient cultures describe them as coming in flying boats, or in the Vedic tradition, flying machines, and so on. There is many mention of these sun gods coming through time.
Could these early pilots from beyond our world be the ones responsible for sharing the knowledge of this code? Could they actually be tapping its power to propel themselves through the cosmos?
The Bible, a sacred text filled with fantastic tales of an awesome supernatural force. But what if that force wasn't God? What if it was a UFO? In Ezekiel, what was that gleaming wheel within a wheel that descended on the prophet? In the Sodom and Gomorrah of Genesis, where did the devastating fire and brimstone come from? In Exodus, what was that presence in the sky that led Moses through the desert? Were these the actions of God? Or might these mysterious forces in the skies have been UFOs in the Bible?
They are trying to manipulate our history, saying we were created by aliens, and they gave us the knowledge and all we have, justifying all we created. All those inventions and technology that humans made come from extraterrestrial beings, showing to humanity as a silly being. It is therefore necessary to listen to the voices of those who are opposed to what the lead intends to sell us the truth. Dr. Carol Rosin, former NASA scientist, gives a different version of what the governments and mass media say.
When I was a corporate manager of Fairchild Industries in 1974 through 77, I met the late Dr. Wernher von Braun in early 74. At that time, von Braun was dying of cancer, but he assured me that he would live a few more years in order to tell me about the game that was being played, that game being the effort to weaponize space, to control the Earth from space and space itself. Von Braun's purpose in life during the last years of his life, his dying years, was to educate the public and decision makers about why space-based weapons are a dumb, dangerous, destabilizing, too costly, unnecessary, unworkable, undesirable idea. The strategy that Wernher von Braun taught me was that first the Russians are going to be considered to be the enemy. In fact, when I met him in 74, they were the enemy, the identified enemy. We were told that they had killer satellites. We were told that they were coming to get us and control us, the dirty commies, that whole story. First, the Russians were the enemy against whom we're going to build space-based weapons. Then terrorists would be identified, and that was soon to follow. We heard a lot about terrorism. Then we were going to identify third world country crazies. We now call them nations of concern. But he said that would be the third enemy against whom we would be needing to build space-based weapons. And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens, and all of it, he said, is a lie.
Also noteworthy, the point of view in this subject of William Cooper, U.S. military Air Force and later the Navy in the 60s. He became famous due to the information he revealed about the system and the military anti-gravity technology. He revealed, before it happens, the 9/11 Gulag coup. Few months later of the 9/11, he was killed by the police when they went to his house to detain him.
While we were on a transit from the Portland-Seattle area, on the surface, I was the port lookout, and I saw the most incredible thing that I think I've ever seen in my life come up out of the ocean, from beneath the surface of the sea, a huge disc-shaped craft about the size of a Midway-class aircraft carrier, which is tremendous in size. Came up out of the ocean and rose into the air and tumbled on its axis and went up into the clouds, and I was awestruck, dumbstruck. And it did something that, as far as I knew, was absolutely impossible. Came from under the water and flew in the air and performed maneuvers, and then came back down and interfaced with the water at tremendous speed and remained intact, which realistically, it never touched the water. The water sort of magically opened up in front of it, but something had to interface with that water. Anything that we had that interfaced with the water in that manner would have been disintegrated. It's like hitting a brick wall. So I was looking at a technology that, as far as our laws of physics and what we knew at that time, didn't exist. This was in 1966. But when we reached Pearl Harbor, we were not allowed to go ashore. And about 2 hours after we berthed at the submarine base, a commander from the Office of Naval Intelligence came on board and debriefed each one of us individually in the captain's stateroom. And the ultimate outcome of the debriefing was that we didn't see anything, we didn't hear anything, and we had to read rules and regulations. Eventually, when they began to have confidence in me, I began to see things coming across my desk that were just absolutely incredible. And a lot of it is really hard to talk about. But I saw documents that were labeled under the classification top secret, and which told me that UFOs are real, which I already knew. I'd seen one. Right. But this went farther than that. It told me that they were extraterrestrial in origin, that there were 4 different extraterrestrial species or races visiting this Earth, and that they had actually entered into an agreement with the United States government with one of these species of alien beings to exchange technology, and they told me all the projects that, and then it was contained after that in another project called Project Aquarius, which was the accumulation of the whole history of alien interaction on planet Earth. But I have to say at this point that I don't know if those documents were really telling the truth or not. They could have been showing me these things so that eventually I would go out and talk about this. And maybe that'll become clear to you later why they may have done that.
In the late 1990s, however, Bill reconsidered much of what he was saying, as his research led him to believe the technology he and others were witnessing may have been the creation of our own government, created and tested in areas such as the infamous Groom Lake, Area 51 in Nevada, where Bill filmed his documentary, Project Red Light.
Then he realized his research at the time was heavily with Lars Hansen and many of them in the UFO realm. And he realized that most of them, and a lot of them upon admittal, and I have the documents, admitted to working for, either in the past or still being on CIA payroll. And he exposed them heavily, speaking engagements, and accused them of falsifying facts, as they called them, to steer people away from an eventual finding out of all the facts and send them down all these wild goose chases.
And how come the government always gets there first? It's podunk time. It's in the middle of nowhere. There's a farmer milking his cow, a flying saucer crashes, and the government gets there before he can get from his cow to the crash site. I may have been misleading somebody along those lines that this whole thing is being brought about by extraterrestrials. I think some of us were really used in the service of our country, and I'm very angry about that.
He then realized that the scope of it was not going to be handled by just searching the paranormal. We had to get more into our worldly realm, right here, right now, the politics, the economics. And that's when he shifted more.
Because one thing I have learned in my life is that most of what we have ever been taught has been a lie.
This earth. I wanted to know just how true all of this was, and I began a program of research to find out if extraterrestrials were real. The first thing I did was collect every bit of documentation that I could find, both and of course through my network of friends in the intelligence community. What I discovered was amazing. What I discovered, ladies and gentlemen, is that there has been a plan in existence since about 1917, and probably before that, to create an artificial extraterrestrial threat to this earth in order to create a one-world totalitarian socialist government. And many, many years ago, all the bombardment of the public with movies about flying saucers in the 50s, right after the United Nations Treaty was signed and the UN Participation Act was pushed through Congress, and all of the incidents since that have convinced the majority of the American people that flying saucers are real and extraterrestrials exist, and that flying saucers are from an extraterrestrial origin. This is being promulgated in many ways, by television commercials, in the movies, in the newspapers, by creating incidents either real or imagined. During the Reagan administration, he made 6 speeches, specifically talked about a threat from outer space by some other species from some other planet. 6, ladies and gentlemen. Why would the president repeat the same thing 6 times, tagged on to the ends of speeches by him? The speechwriters did not put that in the speech. Ronald Reagan added it himself.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
If you're still asking yourself what connection has this part of the video with the rest, the reason is that what we think the elite will make after the Third World War to take us to the wished world government is to invent a fake arrival of aliens from other planets to help us to recover all we lost, giving us technology and advances never seen before. In my opinion, it won't be an invasion as Bill Cooper said, but a peaceful arrival, showing themselves as superior beings to us in all fields. I cannot say more details about this because I don't know first if it will happen, and in case it happens, how it will be. But one thing they have to prepare this fake aliens arrival is they have to have the technology to make us believe on it. One last thing they need is to those supposed extraterrestrial beings. How will they be? What physical form? I think if they want, we accept them, the elite is going to have to create them similar to us, because at the same time they say these beings manipulated our ADN long time ago, and that we are the result from that manipulation, so that we have humanoid aspect. How will they get it? Another thing we must know is the actual technological advances in science, the possibility to manipulate the human's ADN, to clone humans, to make them taller, to decide if they are going to be blonde or the color of the eyes, and along etc. that we don't know. All this is possible already. Many experiments are being made by scientists between humans and animals and other kind of horrors. One time the nuclear conflict is made, and they have got the chaos they wish. Starships will appear in the sky, and from them, these fake beings will come out to help us.